What's up, everybody? This is Takum Rawi from HIIT.VC. Today we got a special guest, my homie Abdelrahman Mohamed. He is the Vice President of Life Sciences at RBCx. He runs the Eastern Canada practice, and also he's a former boxer. So I'm gonna get ready before he gets here. We're gonna do a boxing workout, then we're gonna get into a interview. Let's go. It's been a long time coming, man. We've been wanting to do this for a while.
Yeah. I was a chemist by trade, and I graduated Queen's with a chemistry degree. I thought that there was another pathway for me. So I kind of opened myself up to new experiences, went to networking events, tried to meet people in the industry. Something that taught me discipline, how to be humble, learning new things, and having that ability to adapt in a very quick environment. So that to me was boxing growing up.
My legs are done. My legs are dead. I appreciate you, homie. That was great.
I loved it, man. Thank you for having me, man.
Oh, man. So the next time a boot offers you a term sheet, as a pop, they accept the term sheet. You don't want to be this bad.
It's like some wrist rotations here.
Okay, so you do this before every workout?
Yeah, every single workout. I try to get my wrist. Do a few pogos to get our feet ready. It's like not as nervous as I am the night before, right? Let's get our shoulders nice and ready for this. Boxers, they stand a little bit more sideways. So whenever you have a wider stance, a wider base, you're not worried. You have your base, your hands are up, and then the first, make sure that your hand extends all the way, and it recoils back, and then you move. Cross, and it's a single line. You're imagining the slope. Get back, yeah. I feel good. Yeah, I feel good.
That was nice, though.
Like, maybe do 1 minute on the back, the other close as possible, and you throw that left hook. So with the left hook, pivot on that front foot as if you threw the cross right here.
Yeah.
And you're just kind of exploding. Nice. Nice. Go. 10 more seconds. Woo!
So the next time a boot offers you a term sheet, they accept the term sheet. You don't want to be this bad. What's up, man?
All good, man. I just came here today. I had a really good workout.
Yeah, you did. You put me through a tough one, too. It's been a long time coming, man. We've been wanting to do this for a while.
Yeah.
So for context, Abood and I have discussed this for like over a year.
Yeah.
Over a year. Despite working in the same industry, Abood is the homie, and he's also got an interesting background, career, and boxing. So I think to start it off, like, how did you get into boxing, man?
I got into boxing very young. So I was probably around 10 or 11 years old.
Right.
I was getting bullied at school, funny enough, and I, got beat up quite a lot. So I figured, what's the best way for me to kind of take control of the narrative? And for me, it was just learning self-defense.
Right.
So my grandfather, one of his really good friends, was running the Egyptian national boxing team at the time, and he put us in touch. And we got along infamously. It was, for me, it was love at first sight. When you just step into that boxing ring, you learn a new skill set. It's something that you don't come by often, and boxing was that for me. And it started off as something that was more vengeful energy in the beginning, something I was just angry about, and it became something a lot more, something that taught me discipline, how to be humble, learning new things, and having that ability to adapt in a very quick environment. So that to me was boxing growing up.
And I'm sure that probably transitioned a lot into your career. But before we get to that, like, was the decision to go into boxing, was this an Abu decision? Was this kind of like your folks and your grandfather saw that you were getting bullied? Like, who made the decision to put you in boxing?
It was solely out of necessity for me. So my parents didn't know for a while. I was honestly, to an extent, just kind of ashamed of it. So I didn't really speak to them about it. And my grandfather was the one who found out, just by virtue of him seeing me like after one of those infamous bullying sessions. So I kind of went and spoke to him. He told me best way to control the narrative is just take control of it. And he put me in touch, and I decided that that's what I wanted to do.
And was the goal to continue boxing as personal interest, passion, or, there's a point in time where like, I think I want to be a pro fighter?
I think it started off a little bit more of just like, I want to learn how to defend myself.
Yeah.
And then it slowly progressed into, this is something that I can do well. And this is something that I've dedicated a lot of hours to. And there was a point in time where I thought I was going to go all the way and become a professional, but life has a way of figuring itself out, and maintaining boxing in my life was important to me as I kind of transitioned into my career journey.
Right. Okay. That's actually a perfect segue. So walk us through the career journey, because in the intro, we briefly covered all the things that you've done. So you start where you want to start, but the ultimate, how did you end up to where you're at right now?
Yeah. It was, you know what? I think for me, it was just a combination of a bunch of happy coincidences. So I was just open to new experiences, and that's kind of what brought me to the point in my career. I was a chemist by trade, and I graduated Queen's with a chemistry degree. And my parents kind of wanted me to either go into the industry, so pursue my master's and PhD, or go to med school directly. And I thought that there was another pathway for me. So I kind of opened myself up to new experiences, went to networking events, tried to meet people in the industry. And lucky enough, I met with the president of the bank at the time, the regional president. We got along really, really well. And after that, we stayed in touch, and that opened up the opportunity for me to go into business banking.
Right.
So that was probably the first happy coincidence that brought me into the banking industry. And then a series of other happy coincidences kind of led me to where I'm at today, where, just being open to new experiences, I wanted to learn a little bit more about the management consulting and the enterprise risk consulting side, and went and did that for a few years. And then when I learned a little bit more about the innovation economy and kind of where tech and innovation is going to take us over the next few years, I knew I wanted to be a lot more involved. So when I heard about RBC and RBCx and what they were trying to build, I knew I just wanted to be a part of that journey.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. So one of the things that's always interesting to me is, I've even noticed with myself, I start a job and I feel like I'm starting with skills like just from baseline zero. But what happens in life is that like everything builds on each other. So I'm kind of curious, from your boxing days to your banking days, and then consulting, and then into RBCx and like venture, like what are some of the skills that have transitioned the whole way? And I'm sure there's a lot of stuff from boxing.
Yeah.
But like just curious, like what are the things that have kind of built on each other?
You know what? I think discipline and consistency are probably the two main themes that come to mind.
Right.
So just showing up every day and being able to get 1% better, and being able to admit that you don't know everything. Like, I think that's part of the most important thing is, you start a new career, you start a new sport, you're starting from scratch, and just being able to be humble enough and say, there's everyone else here in this room is better than me at this. And I just have to come in with the mindset that I'm just going to be a sponge and absorb all the information I can and learn from the best people in the industry. So I think that kind of helped my career progression a lot, of just not coming in with the mindset of I know everything, but more or less just being open to learn.
Gotcha. Okay. And so when, you talk about like where you're at right now, like what do you do? Let the people know, like what is your role? What are your
For sure.
responsibilities? What does a day-to-day look like?
Yeah, so I'm a VP Life Sciences at RBCx. So I cover our Eastern Canada practice with the Life Sciences team under our two fearless leaders, Ann Woods and Rebecca. I have to give them a special shout out because they took me under their wing. They taught me everything I needed to know about the role.
Right.
But I ended up here again by accident. Chemist and biochemist by trade, ended up in kind of the life sciences world again. And I wanted to be a little bit more involved with the biotech scene, the medtech scene. There was a growing need for it at the time. And about a year ago, our team published, our team highlighted an article that kind of overall just highlighted the need for more focus in the life science sector specifically. So when Ann Woods and Rebecca Ross joined the team, I knew it was kind of my calling to go back to my roots in the chemistry side and help support the life sciences ecosystem.
Right.
So we do that through our kind of venture banking practice, which is to support a lot of the life sciences ecosystem, with capital and kind of our strategy beyond the capital side. So our main capital vehicle is kind of our venture debt practice that we help support companies as they continue to scale and raise growth equity capital rounds. On the back end of the growth equity capital rounds, we support them with additional non-dilutive funding through venture debt.
Gotcha. Okay, there's so many different ways I can go with this, but like maybe to start off for like a founder who's listening, like when does it make sense to approach you?
As soon as they're getting ready for a growth equity round. I think it's really important for us to just get a baseline understanding of what their capital needs are and really understand the storyline of what they're trying to build and what their timelines are. And as soon as that conversation gets started, we can get engaged, we can have a conversation, and we can position where our value proposition is with, both our practice beyond the banking side and what our capital can do for companies as they continue to scale.
And so when you're having those conversations, you're assessing these founders, their businesses. What are the sorts of things that you're looking at?
For the most part, when we are talking to founders, I think there's a lot of things that come into play. The founder's background, whether he's a science founder or someone who's coming from a non-technical background, and biotech specifically, most of them are science founders.
Right.
Almost everyone has a PhD. Almost everyone has a lot of experience in their domain of expertise. So it's also just figuring out whether or not those companies have that reach to be able to go through the regulatory milestones, regulatory approval, how feasible it is for them to get to the clinic. And VCs usually do a good job of assessing that. So we kind of triage on the back end of what the VC's due diligence is to kind of extend our capital on the venture debt side.
Right. Okay. So you touched on scientific backgrounds with these founders. And I mean, like you can't escape it in life sciences. You kind of need, you need that background. But like, what is that balance like? Do you find founders that have more of an academic background or more of a scientific background have a harder time commercializing? Do they stay in like research mode for longer? Like when you kind of reflect on some, maybe not even like, investments that you've made in the past, but like just looking industry wide.
You know what? It's tough to say because I think, again, like most founders kind of have some sort of technical or scientific background.
Right.
Taking that science and bringing it out of a university or an institution and actually making a business out of it, developing an asset and kind of figuring out the regulatory timelines is a whole other thing.
Right.
So I think the biggest challenge for founders who have been super involved with the science side and know that really well is how do I actually make a business out of what I'm trying to develop? And really good VCs do a good job of that with their domain expertise, plugging them into the ecosystem, identifying how they can set up some of their regulatory trials. And that's biotech specific. For medtech, that pathway to regulatory approval is much shorter compared to developing a therapeutic. Right. Same with, a tool or a diagnostic. So that looks a little bit different when you compare biotech, medtech, tools and diagnostics.
Sticking to the opportunity in the Canadian ecosystem. So a handful of questions, but maybe we'll start off with that. The market is pretty fragmented, massive opportunity. What would you say are the biggest misconceptions or misunderstood aspects of the ecosystem in Canada?
I think life sciences specifically, and if I want to focus a little bit more on biotech,
Right.
I would say that probably one of the biggest misconceptions is that revenue equals value. And that's not applicable in deep tech specifically, right? Like companies that are pre-revenue, pre-commercialization, pre-regulatory approval. And biotech, for the most part, that's most companies in the earlier stages. So that's probably one of the biggest misconceptions in the space, is that revenue is the root cause of where value is created. Whereas in deep tech, it's just creating an asset that has, that addresses an unmet potential or an unmet need, or improves on an outcome compared to, something that compares to it in its field. So it's a little bit different when you compare apples to apples, because, on one hand, maybe a tech investors would look at it and have an idea of what's the revenue potential and what's the commercialization scale of this company, versus biotech is, how feasible is it for this company to go through regulatory approval, go through its clinical milestones, and achieve a really good data set for its clinical trials. And that's where value is created along each step of these milestones.
So maybe dive into that a little bit, because, where I sit, at least a lot of the investments that I've made in the past, slowly changing when you start to look at autonomous vehicles and stuff like that. But regulation has not been one of the biggest obstacles. Maybe just walk us through when you're making these bets, is it on the same time frame as when I'm making a bet? There's a lot of subsequent challenges that you're facing from a regulatory standpoint and approval of different drugs. So maybe just touch on that a bit.
I think the timelines are a little bit different because exits in the life sciences sector specifically typically take a little bit longer than general tech.
Right.
So whether that's ICT or anything else within the sector itself, it typically takes a little bit longer for an exit, and that's just by virtue of a very small percentage of companies that start their clinical trials or try to enter into the clinic rarely ever make it all the way past the phase 3 and get their NDA and then actually fully commercialize their products. Probably somewhere around 1% is the estimate between different studies that go from start to finish all the way. Most of the companies in Canada specifically get acquired past phase 2 approval. So once they have some really good data set around their clinical trials around the phase 2, they're typically already have been in conversations with big pharma and look for that acquisition around that. And then big pharma typically fund the entire phase 3 and try to get that product to commercialization on their own, because it takes, I think an average of $300 to maybe $1 billion, depending on what sector,
right,
to actually take that trial from phase 3 from start to finish.
Right.
So it's a very capital intensive process to go through that.
So would you say that there are unique advantages or challenges in the Canadian ecosystem?
There are definitely some unique advantages in the Canadian ecosystem. So, global talent, I think that we have really, really good talent in the field, really good scientists, good institutional research, good universities that help kind of take that research and bring it out of the lab into a business. But there are also a ton of disadvantages in the Canadian landscape. So I think maybe we can chat a little bit about some of those advantages versus the disadvantages a bit later. But for the most part, it's cost-effective place for companies to come and do their research and development. We have globally favorable R&D tax credits by the government. Federal government announcement recently with their federal budget announced, a bit of an increase to that SR&ED credits receivable.
Right.
So that allows us to be a little bit more globally competitive on the research side. So there's a ton of advantages to being a Canadian company developing biotech and in the life science
ecosystem here.
Right. We got to get to those disadvantages. So.
Yeah. There's quite a few compared to our US. US friends. And I think there's probably a few different categories that you can split it up to. One big bucket is kind of that growth capital. That growth scale-up capital for life sciences is nowhere near the same as the US per capita. So even if we're comparing, there's a bigger population there, there's a tenth of the population here almost. Per capita, that scale-up capital isn't really available for some of the growth equity rounds. If we're talking, B, C, D, E rounds and
Right.
kind of above that. So typically companies have to go and seek that capital from their US investors, and that's where they end up trying to set up bases. They also have access to better commercialization hubs, which is something that I think Canada needs to be a little bit more competitive in. It's probably also because of the fact that, drug pricing in the US is completely different than drug pricing in Canada. So it's a lot more competitive, or I guess up until now, still quite competitive compared to Canada. So it's more favorable for companies to go and try to commercialize in the US versus Canada, because pricing is much higher there, and the regulation around pricing is different.
All right, cool. Because that was one of the questions I was going to ask you. Is it seems that a lot of these companies will go and try and commercialize in the U.S. Will almost prioritize commercialization in the U.S. over Canada, and it seems like that's the reason why.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a bigger market,
Right.
So I mean, that's kind of a given that you have a bigger market, you can tackle it. There's a lot more people there's a lot more potential customers there. And it's, again, in the biotech scene, it's about patient or physician uptake, which is probably much higher there and a little bit faster of a process compared to Canada. So just streamlining that, sales process from start to finish is probably one of the things that the Canadian landscape is still trying to figure out and trying to refine, to figure out how do we keep some of those Canadian companies here to help them with their commercialization strategy.
Right. Okay. We're going to switch gears here, and I have to ask you the dirty word, man. I got to get into AI.
Let's do it.
That's where I spend most of my time.
Yeah.
But to keep this like super high level, I'm curious where you're seeing AI advance or be most disruptive.
Right now, I think there's a big focus on health tech. I mean, we're hearing a lot from Canadian hospitals, and you're seeing a longer wait times. Just the ability to have a family doctor or get connected to a family doctor is really difficult.
Right.
And a lot of the administrative tasks and filling out prescriptions or kind of manually billing the Ontario government for certain things, a lot of that takes away from the day-to-day of physicians and their actual clinics.
Right.
So a lot of that work, I think, is slowly starting to be automated, and there's kind of been a big shift in like that care gap AI, or that operational AI that's going to help eventually streamline processes and administrative processes to help these physicians just kind of, shave off a lot of the time they need on the administrative side and focus on actual patient care. So whether it's, triage systems in the emergency room, or, just patient history data that could be collectively put in a centralized system to allow patients to fully migrate that data over whenever they're moving from doctor to doctor, versus having to fax a prescription over, or having to fax documents over. I think eventually AI is slowly starting to take over that role. And, I think there was a report by PitchBook that was published, I think, don't quote me on that, I think around H2 of this year, where there was a big focus from private equity healthcare specialists on that, to try to help kind of navigate some of that care gap in North America.
Do you think, so further to that, do you think that like regulation is there? Like, are we having a more friendly regulatory landscape? Because when I think of the advantages of a startup, one of the advantages is speed.
Yeah.
Right. Like the ability to move fast. But speed is not rewarded in highly regulated industries. So do you think from a regulatory standpoint, we're there, or at least we're making strides to get there?
I don't really know. I think it's a little bit hard to like figure out whether or not there is a gap in the regulatory environment. I think again, like it's quite different when you compare biotech to health tech, because on one side you're developing software to help streamline the delivery of healthcare, and the other you're developing novel therapeutics and assets. So one side has to be heavily regulated because there's patient impact, and there's a lot of scrutiny that has to be put on that. And on the other side, you're also hoping that you can get access to that data quickly, but it's really hard to tell. Like there's different things to consider, like privacy. Patient data is really, really important. How do you protect all that privacy, the privacy of patients when you're moving from one system to another? How do you make sure that all the data that's being transferred from one log to another is moved over transparently and in a complete manner? So I think I don't know that I can speak to the regulatory side of it, but I can obviously understand that speed is a very important part of this.
So I want to take us back to the point on the ecosystem, some of the disadvantages. We covered that, but I want to spend a little bit more time chatting through some of the advantages. Maybe shed some light on that.
So I think the main advantages are that we have strong upstream science, we have globally competitive talents, and we have really strong world-class institutions and universities that allow that science to become businesses and takes that science out of the lab. Also, the cost of doing business in Canada is cheaper comparative to the US, so that there is a bigger advantage. And globally favorable R&D tax credits by the government that allow companies to access a little bit more capital when they're doing their science research and development in our backyard. So it obviously allows for that competitive landscape to thrive, and hopefully lets founders feel more at home in the Canadian landscape.
Right. Okay. I want to go back on something again as well. So good to hear about the advantages. But when we're talking about these founders, I'm curious, what are some of the missteps life sciences founders make that is kind of like, hey, I've seen this as a trend amongst whether these are investments that you all have made or just across the ecosystem?
You know what? I think in the early stage, one of the more common things you see is that founders just try to take control of everything. They want to micromanage every little piece and every little decision. And to an extent, they kind of have to do that at the very, very early stage when they're building a business. They're super scrappy. They want to make sure they learn things along the way. But when a business gets to a certain scale, they kind of have to let that go. They should be able to delegate, hire, really good professionals on the finance side, on the operations side, and biotech on the regulatory side to help them actually build the business out. But I think if they have a super tight grip on that, they lose sight of what's important in the business, and the hope that you can just learn along the way is a little bit more of a hope than it is an actual step in the right direction.
Right. Gotcha. Okay. So the last little bit here is we're going to do some rapid fire health and fitness questions. I actually wrote them down on my phone.
I love it.
So you got to be on the ball.
Let's do it.
Real quick. Sauna or cold plunge?
Sauna.
All right. Morning training or evening training?
Morning.
Heavy lifts or high rep conditioning?
Both.
Nice. Boxing or strength work?
Boxing.
Actually, which one is harder mentally?
I would say if you're new to boxing, absolutely it's boxing. If you're not someone who's trained in it, it's definitely boxing. But for me, strength training is a little bit harder because boxing it feels like water. I'm on there.
You flow state like you.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, where we at here? One supplement. If you could take one supplement for the rest of your life.
Creatine, for sure. That's the most researched supplement out there.
Let's go. What's the best book or podcast for learning resilience? Or the best book or podcast that you've heard lately?
The best book I've read lately, I would say The Catalyst.
The Catalyst.
Yeah, it was an excellent book. I think it was Jonah Berger from Stanford University.
Okay.
Really excellent author, and he kind of talks about how to convince anyone of anything. So just being able to find common ground with people. And his idea, his main theme in the book is that a catalyst, and funny enough, this is a reference to the biotech side. A catalyst is, something that removes friction and decreases the energy needed for a reaction to happen. So he argues that we, as salespeople or whatever you do in life when you're trying to convince someone of something, you have to act like a catalyst. So rather than try to force a reaction to happen by increasing the energy needed for the reaction to happen, you need to remove barriers and decrease friction needed for the reaction to happen organically or quickly.
I want to make a note of that one, the Catalyst.
Yeah.
Okay, rewrite that, the Catalyst. Last question. 3 traits every high-performance founder needs.
I think I alluded to 2 of them already. So discipline, consistency, and the ability to pivot quickly. That's, I would say those are definitely the 3 top things.
Perfect. That's all I got for you, man.
My man.
Another episode, HIIT.VC, Abood, in the boxing gym, life sciences. Let's go.
Let's go.
My legs are done. My legs are dead. Oh. I don't even understand. That's
The post-credits. The post-credit scene.
He's just keeping it together. He was
Let's go.
No, that was beautiful, man. I appreciate you, homie. That was great.
I loved it, man. Thank you for having me, man.
Oh, man.
I thought that was such a good combo.
I thought it was a fantastic. First of all, I think it was a fantastic episode.
Yeah.
But like, you're also a fun person.